In the year 80 AD, the Emperor Titus opened a new stadium in Rome to celebrate. He gave the population 100 straight days of games. 9,000 animals slaughtered, thousands of gladiators, hundreds of thousands of citizens entertained, fed, and emotionally absorbed inside that building for over 3 months. And while the crowd screamed, while bread was handed out freely, while emperors watched from golden balconies above the arena, something psychologically important was happening. The people were distracted, emotionally occupied, connected to spectacle, and no longer asking where all the power had gone. Rome discovered something terrifying about human nature. People do not need chains to surrender freedom. If you give them comfort, entertainment, identity, and distraction, many of them will surrender it willingly. And once that process begins, control no longer feels like oppression. It feels normal. In ancient Rome, there was a phrase that explained everything. Panem et Circenses. Bread and circuses. The Roman satirist Juvenal used it to mock his own society. He believed Romans had traded genuine political power for comfort and entertainment. And the disturbing part is how deliberately engineered the system actually was. At its peak, Rome operated more than 180 public holidays every year. Citizens received free grain, free games, public baths, subsidized oil and wine, massive spectacles designed to emotionally absorb the population. This was not generosity, it was architecture. The games were not designed merely to entertain Romans. They were designed to regulate them psychologically, to absorb frustration, redirect anger, replace political participation with spectacle, and perhaps most importantly, to make millions of people feel emotionally connected to a system that was quietly removing their power. Roman emperors understood something modern neuroscience has only recently begun to explain. When human beings are emotionally stimulated, socially validated, and continuously entertained, critical thinking does not merely weaken. It begins shutting down entirely, not unwilling, incapable. Because during states of collective excitement and emotional reward, the brain prioritizes belonging over analysis, emotion over skepticism, pleasure over reflection. You are entertained. You are fed. You are surrounded by thousands of people experiencing the same emotions simultaneously. And in that state, human beings become remarkably easy to guide. But bread and spectacle were only half the system. The other half was image. Rome saturated daily life with the face of the emperor, on coins, on statues, on military standards, on public buildings, on triumphal arches, until eventually, the emperor stopped feeling like a political figure and started feeling like part of reality itself, because people rarely question systems that feel permanent, and Rome understood this deeply. Then came the triumphs, the most spectacular public events the ancient world had ever seen. Victorious generals entered Rome dressed almost like gods. Gold chariots, captured treasure, foreign prisoners chained through the streets, soldiers chanting their names, crowds packed shoulder to shoulder across the city. But psychologically, the triumph was not celebration. It was neurological theater, a mass emotional ritual designed to overwhelm the senses, the music, the gold, the movement, the spectacle, the sheer scale of collective emotion, and at the center of it all, a man painted to resemble Jupiter himself. You were not being asked to admire him. You were being conditioned to experience him as inevitable. Because when thousands of people around you believe something simultaneously, your nervous system begins treating belief itself as evidence. And eventually, you stop questioning whether power is legitimate. Because legitimacy begins feeling emotionally obvious. You believe. But no system of manufactured consent lasts forever, because there is a limit to how long spectacle can replace meaning. By the 3rd century, Rome was beginning to run out of both. The treasury weakened, political instability accelerated. The games became more extreme. The faces on Roman coins changed faster than citizens could memorize them. In 235 AD alone, Rome cycled through 6 emperors, and this exposed the fatal weakness in Rome's psychological system. They had manufactured dependence, not loyalty. Those are not the same thing. A population that follows you because you feed them will follow whoever feeds them next. A crowd trained to crave spectacle will eventually demand larger spectacle. And a society emotionally conditioned to worship image will abandon old images the moment they begin to crack. The illusion worked brilliantly until reality became too heavy to suppress. And this is why Rome still matters, because the uncomfortable truth is that human psychology has changed far less than technology. Think about how easily distraction becomes routine. Think about how quickly stimulation begins replacing reflection. Think about how comforting it feels to enter environments where thinking becomes unnecessary, where identity is provided for you, where belonging feels automatic, where emotion quietly replaces analysis. Rome understood this deeply, long before modern psychology gave it language. The empire did not simply control people politically, it managed them emotionally. And perhaps that is the most sophisticated form of power ever created. Not force, not fear, but the ability to make human beings voluntarily participate in the systems that diminish their freedom. Rome leaves behind a question that every civilization eventually confronts. If people can be made comfortable enough, entertained enough, emotionally occupied enough, at what point do they stop noticing who actually holds power? For centuries, Rome answered that question successfully, and for a while, the system worked, until eventually, the spectacle became larger than the civilization itself. History does not repeat, but the people inside it do. Subscribe to Empire Psychology for cinematic documentaries exploring power, collapse, propaganda, leadership, and the hidden psychology behind history. Power shapes history. Human nature repeats it.